In 1978, a Hong Kong action film was released which would come to be called Drunken Master by English-speaking audiences. Starring Jackie Chan as the legendary Wong Fei Hung, this film immortalized a truly spectacular tradition of Chinese martial arts and brought it to the attention of audiences around the world. Were it not for that film, and its 1994 sequel, the very concept of the Drunken Master would be virtually non-existent in Western media. In 2003, the infamous game publisher known as Wizards of the Coast released the Complete Warrior Handbook, a supplementary rulebook for 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons with features like new spells, feats, items, and classes. This publication marks the first time that the concept of the Drunken Master was made into a playable character class in any edition of D&D. Third edition was notoriously dense with rules, so this book went into fairly meticulous detail concerning the spectacular abilities and general disposition of this playable character. Some of the highlights are as follows: Drink like a demon, Breath of Fire, Corkscrew Rush. These details are all drawn directly from the stunt work of Jackie Chan. This Drunken Master is what you would call an homage. It makes no secret of taking its inspiration from the films. This book would be replaced by other publications featuring similar concepts for the next 2 editions of D&D, and a few years ago, the latest version was published for 5th edition. I would like to say that there's nothing wrong with the 5th edition version of the Drunken Master. I would like to say that, but I can't, because there is objectively a lot wrong with it. I want to reassure you that I didn't make this video just to be edgy and hypercritical, but I am here to pay tribute to someone and something that has inspired me since I was very small, and to promote a higher standard of respect between cultures. In order to do that, I have no choice but to criticize the official publication, because it does not meet that higher standard I wish to promote.
唔使驚，起身啦！
呢位壯士啲功夫都唔錯。
年青人，你啲功夫都唔錯，不過你啲醉拳就冇
得頂啊！
唔係噃，係你啲醉拳冇乜力啊，打唔死人㗎。
咩話？你話我啲醉拳打唔死人，咁要再領教下啦。
The martial arts phenomenon known as drunken boxing has existed for centuries in Chinese martial arts, capturing the imagination of practitioners and spectators alike. By contrast, it has barely had a few decades to grace the silver screen and enter the collective imagination of Western pop culture. While these antics may at first seem like simple horseplay, practicing this discipline requires incredible athleticism and agility. The writers of 3rd edition paid homage to an existing and fantastical interpretation of drunken boxing, one which features authentic Chinese martial artists and was made by a Hong Kong action studio, whereas the writers of 5th edition took it upon themselves to create their own interpretation of drunken boxing, while simultaneously removing any reference to Chinese culture or martial arts.
係啦，前輩，其實中國歷代到而家有咁多個皇帝，少金個玉璽有乜所謂啊？
嗱，佢今日搶走個玉璽，如果你唔制止，聽日可能拆埋隻長城，咁以後啲子孫就要去到外國，至睇到中國嘅國寶八國聯軍為咩事攻入北京？無非都係想瓜分中國呢個肥豬肉啫。所謂弱肉強食，你自己都唔振作，人哋仲會同你客氣咩？有強權武功你係必然嘅，你有本事人哋自然會尊重你。所謂人必自侮，而後人侮之。
係喎，多謝前輩指教。
飲杯。
By now, in 2022, almost 50 years after the release and wild success of the first Drunken Master film, it's easy to claim another source for your ideas. But the truth is that without the success and popularity of these two films, drunken boxing would only be a novelty to the global community, a niche expression of martial arts which was rarely seen or talked about by anyone other than pugilists and students of Chinese history. The popularity of these films with global audiences, and the popularity of the kung fu genre in general, helped to seed interest in and respect for Chinese culture across the world. Perhaps the writers of 5th edition wanted to capture something special about drunken boxing, which is not represented by the films. Perhaps they felt that drinking alcohol was not something they should encourage their potentially young audience to do. These concerns may come from a reasonable place. In fact, I can imagine many good reasons why a publisher might want to avoid directly referencing a specific film. But the final product is something which fails to pay credit at all to the cultural tradition which it is imitating. The final product, to me, comes across as a lampoon of its own intentions. This Drunken Master is neither aware of its own origins, nor does it respect the films which introduced those origins to the world stage. I think it's worth noting that while companies which produce games can sometimes be slow to adapt to the existence of new ideas within the civil rights movement, Wizards of the Coast has made some gestures which show that they at least comprehend how their work might contribute to systemic racism. So I would never suggest that the content creators at Wizards intentionally removed references to Chinese culture in order to arrive at some kind of boring, uninspired, and whitewashed final product, but I am saying that they did that by accident. I dislike boasting, and I dislike talking about my own work in general. I feel strongly that my work should speak for itself, and that I shouldn't need to explain what's good about it most of the time. But I also feel that this video would be incomplete if I didn't give some explanation as to what makes my version better than the one I'm critiquing. My Drunken Master gains proficiency with brewer supplies and improvised weapons. Inside or outside of combat, they can consume an alcoholic drink in order to heal their wounds and gain temporary HP. However, this healing comes from sacrificing their own hit dice. The Drunken Master can continue drinking even once they have no hit dice left, but this causes exhaustion and can theoretically kill them. Not only is this character more fun and interesting to play, it's more authentic in terms of representing its own source material.
飛鴻曾經用醉拳打贏過人，就念念不忘。我唔俾佢打醉拳係有原因嘅。其實醉拳幾好啊，打醉拳一定要靠飲酒，飲得多就會醉。喂話打人連企都企唔穩，所以佢今次係出事。咁飲少啲咪得咯？飲得啱啱好，等酒精發揮興奮同麻醉作用，令你打人又大力啲，俾人打亦唔覺得痛，好似好威猛咁。但係酒係會越飲越多嘅，最後會為咗醉拳而變成酒肚，咁就唔值得啦。 不過每一樣事物都有好有壞，好似水能載舟，亦能覆舟。有時為咗警惡懲奸，飲多一兩杯都情有可原嘅。
好深奧喎，老爺，你講咗等於冇講。
點解？
咁點先算水能載舟？點叫做水能覆舟？幾時飲？飲幾多先算啱啱好呢？
The incredibly unique portrayal of drunken boxing in these two films is undeniably the source of the sloppy work found in Xanathar's Guide, as it is the source of almost every pop culture incarnation of this character. And yet, these films are not narratively dedicated to acrobatics. Jackie's performance is one of incredible skill and ability, and yet that is only movie magic taking place behind the scenes. The skill required to duplicate his antics is never talked about or acknowledged within either of the films. Instead, both films' narratives are about balancing the temptation of arrogance along the razor-thin edge of being overwhelmed by ambition. They intend to impart a general lesson, which is supposed to apply to many different walks of life. We live in a world where fast and efficient solutions can be helpful for meeting our immediate goals, and also disastrous to our personal health and long-term relationships. The Wizards of the Coast would have you believe that drunken boxing is an evasive, athletically challenging technique, one which focuses on athletic prowess alone and has nothing to do with consuming alcohol. But if that's the case, why call this character a drunken master in the first place? It's true that many people in China practice kung fu in this manner, and did so long before the films were ever recorded. But if you are trying to represent their culture, then why haven't you acknowledged it at all? Wizards have missed the very moral of the story they are ripping off, a cautionary tale about greed and empty ambition. They have done their best to abandon any connection with the films. And with it, they have abandoned any connection with Chinese culture. Diversity is not simply a method of enriching the competition for resources. The beauty of diversity, of different creators with different visions, is not a competition to force one another off the stage. Rather, it is an opportunity to express a mutual appreciation of the same subject. With a diversity of creative visions, the audience is the true benefactor. When we have the ability to compare and contrast, and to learn more than one interpretation, we begin to see more of the subject's true splendor. In that spirit, I still think my own version is better. I think it's more authentic, but I do not wish to declare myself the winner of any sort of competition. I wouldn't force my version on anyone, nor disparage those who still prefer the original. I haven't beaten the authors of 5th edition, or surpassed them in some way. In fact, I have added to the richness of their game. The true victory belongs to everyone who shares our love for Kung Fu films. We all get to experience the beauty and magic of other cultures from around the world, and we all get to imagine ourselves as Kung Fu heroes. As always, you can find a link to my version of the Drunken Master in the description below. Special thanks to the home brewery for helping me create it.